Yes.
Dim the lights, let go of the day, and slip into something a little more honest. You're listening to Why Is It So Hard with Lizzie and Nash, where things get deep, raw, and just a little dangerous.
You're listening to Why Is It So Hard? I'm Lizzie. Before we start, I need to warn you, this one's going to mess with a script you've probably been handed since childhood, because tonight we're talking about ethical non-monogamy. Two words that sound like a paradox, right? Ethical and non-monogamy in the same sentence?
Yeah, like organized chaos or low-fat donut. People hear it and picture a reality show, hot tub, margarita, tears, confessionals. They never imagine two adults in sweatpants at midnight whispering about honesty over leftover Thai food.
Exactly. Nobody ever says, maybe this is what deep love looks like when you stop lying. They just think scandal. And that's why we wanted to record this, because where we live, a small town, everybody knows everybody kind of life. You don't talk about this stuff unless you want to be the cautionary tale at church.
And we're kind of done being scared of that. If you're listening in a place where everybody waves but nobody actually knows you, then you get it. You can't even buy wine without running into your cousin's ex-wife's nephew who wants to ask you about your open marriage.
The thing is, we didn't get here because something was broken. We got here because we were curious. And curiosity is the most human thing on the planet. We already had love, trust, connection, but we also had questions. Questions like, why do we treat desire like a betrayal instead of a language?
Like many, I grew up with the one person forever rule as part of my moral code. Really because nobody ever explained that it doesn't always have to be that way. Turns out, like many other things, it's okay to think outside the box, and when you have the right partner, you communicate.
That's how it started. Long conversations, no plan, just honesty spilling out. It wasn't sexy at first. It was terrifying. Because once you say, I've thought about this, you cannot unsay it.
I remember sitting there thinking, I'm about to detonate my life. And you just kind of looked at me and said, well, maybe we build something new out of the pieces. That moment, pure relief.
Because nothing dies when you start telling the truth. It just transforms. Love doesn't shrink, it stretches. That's what people don't get. Ethical non-monogamy isn't about less love, it's about more honesty.
And honesty is messy.
Yes.
It's awkward pauses, bad timing, sweaty palms, tears, and sometimes laughter in the middle of both. But when the dust settles, you're left with trust that's earned and not assumed.
Let's talk about that. Trust. Because people think trust means never being tempted. But real trust is knowing temptation doesn't stand a chance against transparency.
That's it. If you can tell your partner the thing you're scared to say, the thing that feels risky, and they don't run, man, that's intimacy.
And maybe that's the first myth we should burn. That love only counts if you want no one else. That's not love. That's isolation dressed up as romance.
You said burn, and I pictured a bonfire. We're just tossing the bad scripts in there. Disney movies, purity culture, reality TV, jealousy arcs. Whew.
Keep going.
Hallmark cards, wedding vows written by strangers, every story that ends with, and then they never looked at another soul again.
Meanwhile, real life is we built a mortgage, a Spotify playlist, and anxiety disorder.
Exactly. Non-monogamy isn't an escape hatch. It's an experiment in radical honesty. It's learning to separate the emotion of love from the logistics of exclusivity.
We get so many messages from people who say, I think my partner might be open to this, but how do I bring it up? I always say very slowly and maybe after a drink.
Yeah, preferably not tequila.
Right? Tequila makes everything sound like a dare. Start with a question, not a confession. Something like, what do you think makes a relationship feel free? Because freedom's the real subject here, not sex.
We spent months just talking. No experimenting, no external anything. Really just verbal cardio. Some nights we'd start confident and end curled up like, do we even know what we're saying? But every round of conversation built a new muscle.
And communication doesn't always feel romantic.
No.
Sometimes it's like cleaning out the garage. You're knee deep in old fears, pulling out old boxes labeled childhood, jealousy, and society's expectations, blowing off the dust. It's messy, but you can't organize anything we don't touch.
That's the difference between fantasy and practice. Fantasy is easy. Practice is paperwork and self-awareness, but you start realizing how much of your silence wasn't peace, it was suppression.
When we finally started speaking freely, everything else, our friendship, our sex, even how we argued, got better. Because truth bleeds into every corner once you let it out.
People think communication ruins mystery, but real mystery isn't hiding, it's discovery. When you tell something new about yourself, that's hot. Because you're still unfolding.
I love that word, unfolding. That's what this lifestyle really is. Two people unfolding instead of folding themselves up small enough to fit inside someone else's definition of love.
Let's be honest, the fear never totally disappears. You'll still have moments of what if this changes everything?
It will, but not always the way you think. It changes the small stuff first, like how you flirt, how you talk about attraction, how you define loyalty. Suddenly, loyalty isn't about being exclusive, it's about integrity.
Yeah, it's not, I'll never touch another person. It's, I won't lie about the touches I want.
That line right there, that's the sexiest promise I've ever heard.
Because it's human. People think we're trying to be rebels, but really, we're just trying to be honest humans in a dishonest culture.
And that's the big cultural rebellion, owning your desires without shame. Desire isn't dangerous, deception is.
We learned that jealousy can live next door to love without burning the neighborhood down, as long as communication's the fire department.
Terrible metaphor, but I'll allow it.
You know what I mean. Jealousy's normal. Lying is optional.
That's what most people don't get. They say, I could never do that. I'm too jealous. But jealousy doesn't mean you're not built for this. It means you're built with emotions that work. The question is, do you listen to them or weaponize them?
We learn to listen. Jealousy became a teacher instead of a tyrant.
Let's make it practical. How do you even start this conversation with your partner? You don't open with, I want to sleep with other people.
I mean, you could.
You start with, I want to be honest about what turns me on.
You start where curiosity lives, not where fear flares. Talk about fantasies first. It's safe ground. Fantasy isn't a contract, it's more of a window.
And listen, not everything you fantasize about needs to happen. Sometimes just talking about it brings the spark back home.
That's what most monogamous couples miss. They outsource novelty to strangers instead of communication. Talk enough and your partner becomes new again.
That's so true. When I hear you describe something you'd love to explore, even if we never do it, I see you differently, like I'm dating your courage.
And that's hotter than any secret affair.
So far, we've torn down the idea that ethical non-monogamy equals chaos, and we started rebuilding it on communication, trust, and honesty. Next, we're going to dig deeper into the messy parts. Jealousy that bites, rules that bend, and how to keep your heart steady when everything around you is learning to expand.
Yeah, the sexy part's coming, but spoiler, the sexiest part is still the truth.
You're such a philosopher when you're smug.
Comes with age.
Okay, now we stop talking theory and start talking reality about rules, boundaries, and jealousy in the wild. So let's start with the thing that scares people most once they stop whispering about the idea. What are the rules? It's the first question everyone asks, like there's a universal handbook hidden behind some secret password. They want guarantees. They want insurance against chaos. And honestly, we did too at first. The brain hates gray areas. It wants checklist and certainty. Like love should come with the term of service agreement you can scroll through before you click, I agree.
But that's the first shock of ethical non-monogamy.
Yeah.
There is no scroll to accept button. You can't import anyone else's template. Every couple, every connection has to draft their own constitution from scratch. And that constitution has to evolve. Because the moment you treat rules like commandments, you stop listening. They should be guide rails, not prison walls.
Exactly. What we really mean is boundaries. And boundaries are alive. They breathe, they adapt, they stretch or tighten depending on what the relationship needs to stay safe. A rule is rigid. A boundary is responsive. If you think about it in body terms, a rule is a cast. It keeps you from moving. A boundary is a muscle. You build it through use.
And muscles ache when you grow them. That's what most people underestimate. They assume once you've drawn the map, you're done. But boundaries only work if you revisit them. You check in, you ask, does this still feel right? Do you still feel safe? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes it's not anymore. That's not failure. That's maintenance.
When couples tell us they tried non-monogamy and it didn't work, it's usually because they treated the first conversation like a contract carved in stone. They forget that desire isn't static. Safety isn't static. People change, schedules change, hormones change, confidence changes. If you're doing this right, you're updating your emotional software constantly.
And if that sounds exhausting, it is. It is work, but it's the kind that keeps relationships awake. You don't have to live in a constant summit meeting, but you do have to keep curiosity alive, because curiosity is the opposite of control.
Let's talk about control for a minute. Control is the ghost haunting every conversation about jealousy. It sneaks in disguised as love. I just want to know where you are, who you're with, what you're thinking. But that isn't love. That's fear pretending to care.
Exactly. Jealousy and control feed each other when communication's missing. If you don't give jealousy language, it turns into surveillance. People start policing instead of connecting. They start keeping score instead of sharing spaces.
Jealousy is not the problem. It's an emotion, like hunger or sadness.
Right.
The problem is pretending it shouldn't exist, because then it festers. When you name it, you make it smaller. When you describe it, where it lives in your body, what memory it echoes, you start to diffuse it.
Yeah, jealousy's like static. You can't eliminate it, but you can tune it until the signal comes through. And half the time, the signal isn't, I don't want you with anybody else. It's, I need reassurance that I still matter. Once you address that, the volume drops.
That's why in non-monogamy, we say jealousy's a teacher.
Yes.
It points to the place in you that still wants attention or healing. The worst thing you can do is shame yourself for feeling it, because shame and jealousy together build a loop. You feel jealous, and then you feel ashamed for feeling jealous, and now you're hiding both. That's how trust corrodes.
Right. The work isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about emotional literacy, learning to recognize what's yours to process and what needs to be shared. You don't dump everything on your partner, but you also don't let resentment write the script.
Jealousy is information, like a dashboard light. It doesn't mean the car is broken. It means something needs attention. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's intimacy. Maybe it's something from 5 years ago still rattling in the trunk. You check it instead of pretending the light isn't flashing.
And when you do check it, that conversation becomes bonding instead of breaking, because vulnerability is strangely erotic when it's honest. Telling your partner, I got triggered and here's why, builds more of a connection than pretending you're made of stone.
That's what monogamy often hides. This illusion that loyalty equals immunity. Like, if you love someone enough, you'll never feel insecure. That's fantasy.
Yeah.
Real love includes the courage to say, I'm secure most days, and today's not one of them.
The cultural script teaches us to interpret jealousy as a threat to love, when in fact, it can be a signal of attachment, but you have to translate it with compassion. Otherwise, you end up reenacting old patterns of ownership.
And ownership kills desire faster than any third person could. Desire needs air. You can't control someone and crave them at the same time. The human brain doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's what I love about this lifestyle. It forces you to trade ownership for stewardship. You don't possess your partner, you care for the space between you. And that space becomes sacred because it's chosen daily, not protected by default.
Exactly. We live in a culture that confuses commitment with captivity. But commitment isn't about locking the door. It's about staying by choice even when the door is wide open. That's faithfulness redefined.
When people ask, how do you trust each other? I say, we don't trust blindly, we trust actively. That means talking, checking in, noticing tone, noticing silence. It's presence, not permission slips.
Active trust also means respecting privacy without secrecy. There's a difference. Privacy is about personal space. Secrecy is about fear. You can keep aspects of your inner world private and still be transparent about your intentions.
That distinction saves a lot of pain, because sometimes people overcorrect. They think ethical non-monogamy means total transparency, total access. That's not intimacy. That's surveillance with better branding.
Right? True intimacy includes respect for individuality. If I want to tell you every detail, that's generosity. If I feel like I have to tell you every detail or else you'll panic, that's anxiety. And nothing healthy grows in anxiety soil.
The deeper you go into this, the more you realize it's not really about sex. It's about self-awareness. You have to dismantle so many old assumptions that love equals exclusivity, that desire equals danger, that honesty equals oversharing. It's like unlearning a language and relearning how to speak in real time.
And the unlearning process is uncomfortable because you start catching yourself saying things you inherited but never examined, like, I could never share my partner. What does that even mean? Share what? Your partner's existence? Their laughter? Their
French
curiosity? We share them with the world every day. We just pretend not to see it.
Exactly. Every friendship, every work connection, every social interaction is a kind of sharing. The only difference is which parts of the self are expressed. Non-monogamy just expands the vocabulary.
And expansion doesn't erase intimacy. It enriches it because you come back with more awareness of yourself, of what you value, of what truly makes you feel secure.
That's why aftercare matters so much, even when there hasn't been any outside interaction. Aftercare is basically relationship recalibration. It's that quiet moment where you look at each other and ask, are we okay? What did we learn this week? What needs adjusting?
It's emotional hygiene. You wouldn't skip brushing your teeth for a month and expect minty freshness.
Gross.
Why would you skip emotional upkeep and expect connection to stay clean?
Aftercare can look like long talks, or it can look like stillness. Sometimes it's not about dissecting the experience, it's about letting the body know it's safe again, because even positive change triggers the nervous system.
People forget how physical, emotional safety is. It's heartbeat, breathing, the way your shoulders drop when someone says, I'm here. That's aftercare. It's telling the body we survived honesty.
And the more you practice it, the easier honesty becomes. It stops feeling like jumping off cliffs and starts feeling like stepping into sunlight.
That's the transition most listeners don't expect. At first, everything feels high stakes. Every conversation, every feeling. Then one day you realize your nervous system can handle more truth than it used to. That's when the peace sets in. Not because things get simple, but because you get fluent.
Fluent in nuance, fluent in emotion, fluent in curiosity. And once you're fluent, jealousy loses its teeth. It still shows up, but now it's just another visitor at the table instead of the loud drunk in the corner.
You can even learn from it. Sometimes jealousy teaches you what you value most. It says, hey, this part of connection matters to me. Instead of fighting it, you can thank it and move on.
That's the weird paradox. The more freedom you create, the more gratitude you feel for the stability you share. Because freedom only feels safe when there's a home base to return to.
And home isn't geography, it's trust. When you know someone's got your emotional back, exploration becomes growth, not threat.
Which is why non-monogamy, done well, looks boring from the outside. Just two people talking, checking in, making dinner, doing laundry. The drama is internal. The reward is quiet confidence.
That's what I wish more people understood. This lifestyle isn't about scandal. It's about building the emotional skill set monogamy promised but rarely delivered. Listening, empathy, patience, communication, repair.
And once you see how those skills translate to everything, friendships, parenting, community, you realize ethical non-monogamy isn't fringe. It's a masterclass in being human.
Exactly. When you practice consent and communication in your romantic life, it spills into everyday life. You start noticing when you override your own boundaries, when you say yes out of guilt instead of choice. You start valuing clarity over comfort. That's personal evolution.
So if you're listening and thinking, this sounds complicated, you're right. But it's the kind of complicated that teaches you things simplicity never will. Monogamy can stay your choice, but at least make it an informed one, not the default.
We're not here to sell a lifestyle. We're here to challenge the autopilot that says love must look this one way or it isn't real. Because when you question that, everything in your life starts breathing again. So after all the theory and all the late night talks, there's the question everyone eventually asks, what does it actually look like to live this way? And I always laugh because the day-to-day isn't fireworks. It's mostly ordinary life with a lot more truth woven into it.
Right. We still pay bills, argue about groceries, forget to switch the laundry. The difference is that nothing's hidden underneath the chores. There's no secret parallel life buzzing in the background.
Exactly. Exactly. Ethical non-monogamy isn't a separate world you visit. It's a mindset you carry. It shows up in how we talk, how we listen, how we manage energy. We plan, we check in, we stay curious.
And it's not glamorous every day.
No.
Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes you overthink. Sometimes you discover a new insecurity and have to decide whether to feed it or face it. The work never stops, but the reward never stops either.
The reward is peace, not the passive kind, the grounded kind that comes from living in alignment. We know who we are. We know what we agreed to. That steadiness feels better than any illusion of control ever did.
One thing I've learned: love isn't a one-time vow. It's a daily decision. Sometimes easy, sometimes conscious labor. Every morning, in some small way, I choose you again.
And I feel that. When you choose me, even after we've challenged each other, that's when I know it's real. Non-monogamy doesn't cheapen love. It clarifies it. Because choice only means something when there are options.
People think exclusivity proves love. I think staying when freedom exists proves it.
Yes. It's like standing in an open field instead of locked room. You could walk away, but you don't. That's intimacy at its purest. Presence, not possession.
I've also realized that romance changes shape. It's not about grand gestures anymore. It's about constant awareness. When you ask, "What do you need right now?" that's romance.
Or when you notice I'm quiet, instead of assuming, you invite me to talk. That's romance too. Because as life keeps your attention sharp, you stop assuming permanence will carry you.
Traditional monogamy can make people lazy. They think forever means I can stop paying attention. Here, attention is oxygen.
Attention and humor. We learn that you can't take yourself too seriously while unlearning centuries of social programming. You have to laugh at the absurdity of it all. How people will accept every other version of diversity, but still panic if you say ethical non-monogamy out loud.
Yeah, they'll be fine with electric cars and vegan cheese, but not with two adults telling the truth.
It's fear disguised as morality, and that's okay. We were all taught it. But what if we could unlearn the idea that love has only one correct silhouette?
That's the part that feels revolutionary without even trying. When you start living honestly, you realize how much of society runs on performance. This isn't rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It's simply refusing to perform anymore.
People sometimes ask if we lost friends when we started talking about this. We didn't lose them, we filtered them. The real ones stayed, curious or supportive. The others faded because our truth made them examine theirs, and not everyone's ready for that mirror.
And that's okay too. Living authentically always rearranges your circle, but what you gain is community built on resonance, not convenience.
That's the quiet beauty of this path. You start meeting people who speak honesty fluently. You don't have to translate yourself anymore.
And you realize the non-monogamous community isn't just about relationships. It's about shared values, consent, communication, compassion. It's the practice of giving everyone agency and expecting the same in return.
Those values ripple outward. You start showing up differently in every space, work, friendships, family. Because once you normalize open communications at home, small talk feels like another form of hiding.
And when people see that steadiness in you, they stop judging and start wondering. They might still not understand, but they sense the integrity behind it.
Something I love about us doing this later in life is that it's not about chasing novelty. It's about cultivating honesty. We've lived long enough to know what matters.
Yeah, when you're younger, you think freedom means unlimited choices. As you age, you realize freedom means honest choices. There's a big difference.
The older you get, the more you realize how precious time is. Why waste it pretending to be palatable? Why not spend it learning everything you can about yourself and the person you love?
That's why I love this version of us. We're not pretending to be perfect or progressive or cool. We're just present. And presence is pretty sexy.
Presence is everything. You can't fake it and you can't outsource it. That's the real intimacy people are starving for.
If you're listening and wondering how to even start exploring this, don't start with dating apps. Start with questions. Ask yourself what freedom means. Ask what scares you about it. Ask what boundaries make you feel safe and what boundaries are really just fear in disguise.
Then take those questions to your partner without agenda, not to convince them, but to invite curiosity. Say, I want to talk about what honesty could look like if nothing was off limits. That's the doorway.
And go slow. This is not a race. It's basically an unfolding. Each conversation builds to the next.
Also, remember that your relationship doesn't need fixing to explore this. Curiosity isn't betrayal, it's intelligence. Even if you stay monogamous, the conversations themselves will deepen your bond.
Because the goal isn't to have more people, it's to have more truth. If the truth stops at 2, fine. If it grows, fine. Either way, you're choosing consciousness over autopilot.
That's the heart of this whole episode. Permission to choose consciously. That's what ethical really means. Not rules, not categories, but responsibility. Owning your choices, owning your words, owning the space you take up in someone else's heart.
Let's talk about the fairy tale for a second, because we all grew up on the same one. Find the one, lock it down, roll your credits. No one told us what happens after the credits.
Right? The fairy tale stops at the wedding because what comes next is too complex for a children's story. But real love starts after the credits. It's a series, not a movie. It's continuous character development.
The rewrite looks like this. 2 people keep choosing each other, keep growing, keep allowing the story to evolve. Sometimes new characters appear. Sometimes old fears return, but the main theme stays. Truth over comfort.
And it's still romantic. It's just a quieter kind of romance, less fireworks, more candlelight you tend every night so it doesn't burn out.
That's what ethical non-monogamy has given me. Not endless novelty, but endless learning. It made me a better listener, a better man, a better partner.
It made me a better version of myself too. More patient, more confident, more compassionate. Because when you learn to sit with your own jealousy, you stop taking other people's emotions personally. You start seeing humanity everywhere.
That empathy spills into everything. You drive differently, you argue differently, you parent differently. You stop assuming you know what's best for everyone because you've learned how complicated it is just to know yourself.
And that's the gift. Non-monogamy didn't save our relationship. It refined it. It made us sharper, more honest, more awake.
So here's the truth. This life is not for everyone, but the honesty it requires, that is. Even if you never open your relationship up, you can open your communication. You can practice radical transparency and radical kindness at the same time.
That's what we hope people take from this episode. Not a lifestyle, but a lens. A way to look at love that allows for reality.
Because reality is where all the good stuff lives.
It's where laughter lives too, and surprise, and grace, and that ridiculous spark that keeps pulling us back together no matter what shape the world takes around us.
So here's to anyone listening who's brave enough to ask questions they were taught not to ask. Keep talking, keep learning, keep letting your heart evolve.
And as always,
keep questioning, why is it so hard?